Hi, property people. Thanks for joining us today. As always, we will be sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions for property people like you. Our interviews will get you to know some of the most active professionals in the industry that have achieved some pretty impressive stuff. Hearing about their successes, failures, strategies, and insights, we really hope you enjoy. Just spent an hour with the co-founder and CEO of Aprao. It's a development finance appraisal tool. Love property technology. I love the way that things can get sped up, inefficiencies in the industry. And this is certainly one of them. I think that it's got massive legs in being widely adopted in the future, from lenders to developers to valuers, and it's got a global reach potentially as well. So it's really interesting to see how it's grown from where it is, where it's come from, where it is today, and where it might be in the next few years. Hope you enjoy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Property People. Today, I am joined by Daniel Norman, the CEO and co-founder of Aprao. Aprao is a development appraisal software that is being used widely across the country. It's a prop tech tool that we should really know about if you're in the development investment space. And Daniel has a background of working with lenders and a variety of other things related to property and finance. And it's a pleasure to have you join us today, Daniel. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And thanks for having me.
Great. Well, before we jump into Aprao, the details, where you are up with it at the moment, how it's all going, I do like, this is all about property and about people as well. And it's always interesting to find out a little bit about the backstory and how, what brought you to this point. So if we were to go back to school, what kind of person were you at school? Were you always into technology? Were you always into property? Did you always think you'd be doing something like what you're doing now?
Yeah, that's going a long way back. But let me think about that. Always quite creative from that point of view. So I was into music and art. So I'm a drummer. So I play the drums. So back at school, it was all about music and creating things. But then I guess that's what led me into property from that point, because it is rare to have something that is tangible. Obviously, software is relatively intangible, but working in property for a decade prior to Aprao, it means that you can be involved in a development project, stand back and actually see a physical building present, which you played a part in. Whether that's the finance or another element, it's still great to see a tangible element, which comes back to that creative side of things back from the school days.
Yeah, and so did you go on to university?
I didn't actually. No, I didn't. So I got accepted into university, but I chose not to. So at the time, I was playing drums. I was in a band and I was playing music.
Cool.
And so decided not to basically hit pause on university for a year and focus on playing music, which I absolutely enjoyed. But then it was after that, which I then had the opportunity to think about, okay, do I take up this position and go to university, or do I start earning money now and move into the world? Start earning money now. And when I started to look around at what I wanted to do, property was one of those areas where I decided actually now's the right time for me to move into property. In 3 years that I could go to university, I could probably learn a lot around property. And my original aim was to actually become a property developer.
Very, very interesting. And just out of interest, though, what kind of band was it?
It was an indie rock band.
And did you not find any? I mean, did you record any music? Did you get very far with it? Because I've the reason why I ask is actually I've been having a chat with a few friends and family members, and I've just had a kid about a year and a bit ago, And we've been talking about, well, what if she wants to be a rock star, or would you force them to go or encourage them to go to university? It's very difficult to make it as a football player or a sports person or in music. How did you find that experience? Because going from a creative into business, where you are now, obviously that's quite a turn. Did you find that music industry was challenging, or did you fall out of love with it? Because sometimes as well, what I find is that when you get paid, when you have to make a career out something you really enjoy as a hobby, it kind of takes away the fun.
Yeah, well, I think that definitely didn't fall out of love with it. I think that you only earn money once you get to a high level within it. But definitely, my advice on that point would be to 100% follow passions, because I don't regret any of it for a second, because it's so many fun experiences which came as a result of that, which ultimately shaped a skill set, which has allowed me to utilize that at a later point in life.
Yeah, fair play. I watched a biopic about the Motley Crue recently. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I saw that one as well. It's good.
It's very good. So, so one thing led to another, and you ended up, you had this passion for property as well, and you thought that would be the way that your career would go. Why property? What was it about property that really, jumped out at you?
I was fortunate that my father had been in property. So I'd grown up as a young child around development sites. He had his own development projects. And so I was aware, I knew more about property than pretty much anything else in the commercial world. And so that was a good starting point. I actually wanted, as I say, to become a property developer. This is very young, naive, straight out of school. So I was thinking that I would gain some experience by working for other people for several years, and then I'd go out on my own and become a property developer. But this was all taking place just before the global financial crisis in 2006, 7, 8, that time. And so, as you can imagine, with the grand idea of going ahead and becoming a property developer as the world plummeted into a recession, and I had no money at the time, wasn't really the best timing to proceed with that. And that actually was where I segued from the desire to become a property developer and ended up in development finance. And then that was where I stayed for almost a decade prior to forming Aprao.
Yeah, so it was. I found it quite interesting. Obviously, I was doing some background research and checking out your LinkedIn, etc. And you have worked for some very prominent lending businesses. So tell us, the experience there, because yeah, I mean, I love property development, but I also went down the lending route as well. And they're both very lucrative if you do them correctly. So how did you find the lending landscape?
So if you take yourself back to that point in time, what was happening was quite interesting, because everybody had been able to get 100% development finance very easily, or very high levels of gearing. And so every person and their dog was a property developer or could become a property developer. And the rising property market meant that people were making money, feeling like they were smart, but in actual fact, it's just a rising tide lifting all the boats. But then what was happening when I moved into the development finance space is the big names, they're like the NatWest, RBS Group, etc., who were funding a large percentage of developers at the time. They basically stopped lending overnight. And there was a lot of good quality property developers in the development world who had great sites. They were buying sites on adjusted site values. So they were buying sites based upon a potential drop in prices factored in, but they couldn't get the finance. And so the lender I was working for, and actually it was originally a development finance brokerage, so at Davon. So I was there structuring finance deals with people, working with lots of different lenders. But whilst I was there, we also raised a mezzanine fund, which is now called Strata Fund, or Strata PLC. And Strata is it was providing mezzanine finance for those deals, because basically what happened is the main bank lenders disappeared. There were other lenders available, but the gearing was not what it used to be. And so there was a big gap, basically meaning that developers needed to put in a lot more equity. So whilst there, I was very busy structuring deals, and also looking at the mezzanine element to basically reduce the amount of equity that developers needed to put into projects.
Interesting. And so from that lending position where you are doing senior, and so were you working for the senior and the mezz, or so how did that work?
It depended on a deal by deal basis. Sometimes it was just senior debt placement. So somebody just needed senior debt and we'd put that in place. Sometimes it would be just the mezzanine. So someone's got a senior debt relationship and we would essentially become the mezzanine lender. And then the third scenario is both. So a developer would come to us and we'd put in place the senior debt, and then we would actually lend that mezzanine ourselves as well. So a combination of all three there.
And just so we can gauge kind of the timeline, what year was this around?
So this was then 2008, 9, 10, that kind of era. So as the financial markets had crashed, there's still a lot of uncertainty around, but actually there was still a good property market there, particularly at that time, it was at the higher end. There's a lot of people financially very secure still through that time. And actually, we did a lot of business in the residential market, but in the higher end. So large single family houses in and around the home counties basically was a bread and butter for a while.
Got you. And so you did that up, was that up until 2010?
No, so I can't remember what year I left then, but I was doing that in total for roughly it was about just under 7 years, 6 or 7 years. And then it was after that that I went over to Hampshire Trust Bank on the senior debt side of things.
Very good. And obviously Hampshire Trust Bank have got a very good reputation in the market, and they've got a pretty sizable loan book at the moment. What was it about that particular lending business that attracted you to them, and why did you decide to make the move at that time?
So for me, there was an interesting shift happening. So Hampshire Trust Bank had been around for a very long time, but then what happened, and they were a bank, hence the name, down in Hampshire. But what happened is Alchemy Partners, who are a private equity firm, had actually purchased the bank primarily for the banking license, retained some of the staff, moved it up to London, and actually set it up as a challenger bank, because the credit availability in the market still was not as strong as it had been. So they saw an opportunity to basically bring what the term used at the time was a challenger bank to the market, to basically compete and fill in that gap with those bigger lenders that had fallen away. So I was relatively early, not one of the first members, but relatively early in the team there. And then I was able to, while I was there, the business grew. I think it was from about 50 to 150 people in the space of only over a couple of years.
I mean, to be part of something like that, which has got quite impressive growth, and considering where they are now as well, I mean, they are one of the better lenders, with some very good rates. So you work with them, and so I'm assuming it's like with the creative mind that you have, you're constantly looking at things on how to improve them or how you can do it better. I mean, you said that your dad's in property. Did you always have that entrepreneurial mindset that you really wanted to do something yourself, and you were just finding where the gap in the market was?
Yeah, absolutely. So many ideas along the way that we won't go into today, but essentially, I was sat there in the banking world receiving Excel models from developers every day. So imagine you've got constant inbound deals coming to you from a huge range of developers, some great, some in the middle, some not so great, but also the financial models varied massively. Even from the great developers, some people will have a all singing, all dancing Excel model, and some people will literally be sending it to you in an email or the back of an envelope, metaphorically, and expecting a bank to make a financial decision based upon very high level information, or actually sometimes far too detailed information than we would need. So I'd spend a lot of my time on the banking side going through those financial models, which were almost exclusively in Excel. And when you go through them, I'd realize that there was pretty much almost always, there was usually an error hidden in there somewhere. usually a formula or two overtyped to show a magical 25% return on cost, or something along those lines. And I was then having to manually input, because basically we couldn't trust the developer's model in the banking world because of those errors and potential for risk. So we would then take their numbers out and put it into our own banking model. And I sat there and I thought, okay, this is crazy. I was spending hours creating financial cash flow forecasts in Excel on projects. And then I thought, well, hang on, how about if we break down that trust and rebuild it with a new model where we say, why don't people trust it? We try and kind of get under the skin of it. We realize that very quickly it's down to that high level of human error that's really damaging the trust. And why don't we create a financial model which basically can start with the developer or somebody selling a site. And then as it progresses, that one financial model can act as a single source of truth and be shared with all of the stakeholders on a project. Because I wasn't the only one creating a financial model from being sent it. We were then instructing Valuation, other professionals, and the developer was working with their professional team. There were other funders involved, maybe equity investors, or maybe mezzanine lenders. Literally everybody was creating their model. So now ultimately we've gone and built that. So a developer can create a financial model and share it with every single stakeholder on the project, which those people can then receive and have an editable version their end to be able to manipulate and do what they need to do with it.
Very, very interesting, simply because I've kind of been through that myself, having been an originator for a lending business, and reviewing, I think it was over 750 different applications in 18 months, and obviously the shapes, colors, sizes of these Excel spreadsheets, which pretty much they were all, barring a few that came on Word documents, which you kind of question whether they've got the ability to develop if they can't put stuff into an Excel spreadsheet at the very least. But even as you said, there were, some of them are very, very detailed, maybe a bit too complex. And some of them were so vague that there were literally 4, 5, 6 lines of kind of, build cost, purchase price, and summaries effectively. And you think, well, how much, where's the breakdown? Where's the thought process? So there needs to be a happy medium to be able to make a fairly quick but informed decision. And, we discussed that actually just before we jumped on. I've actually gone through the process of building my own model, which it is in an Excel spreadsheet. It does need to be tweaked from time to time. It does have bugs in it every now and then, so we'd need to be there to manually kind of update it. In terms of you going through the process of actually really making an off-the-shelf package to be able to give to developers that can be adopted by QSs, that can be adopted by lenders. What was the process? How long did it take you for you to go from conceiving the idea to actually having, let's say, a minimal viable product?
Yeah, so the MVP, the minimal viable product in a development appraisal, is actually surprisingly complex, because it's not like just taking a spreadsheet and putting a skin on it. We've actually built a financial modeling tool in the cloud. So everything that's going on from a calculation perspective is happening in the browser. So without getting too technical, we still had to build the foundations, to put it in property terms, and the plumbing before we could start to layer on anything more interesting on top of that. And so there's a lot of work involved in that to get us to that point. And then from that point, you can build in the foundation, that you can build in the fundamentals of a development appraisal. So adding in revenue, adding in costs, and calculating things like profit. And that's fine, and it works. But then you're pretty much just at the same functionality as an Excel spreadsheet. So somebody sat on the other side of the table from us say, well, I've got an Excel spreadsheet that can do that. So that was foundational. We've done that, and that was our MVP essentially. However, to create and monetize a product, it has to go far beyond that, So we were then layering on features and layering on things that add value beyond just the financials. So obviously we've increased the functionality every few weeks. We've got new features going out. It's constantly evolving. So you can do things like create a cash flow forecast in under 2 minutes. You can calculate your IRRs pretty much instantly on a project. You can see, you can run sensitivity analysis, but no need to worry about pivot tables. It's just there straight up, ready to go. You can quickly manipulate numbers and understand the impact on your residual site value. So all of these things, which are more, they basically just take it much further than just an Excel spreadsheet. Then the next layer on top of that was then adding in the cloud-based functionality, or the things that being in the cloud allowed us to do. So collaboration, where you can have a team board where you can work with your colleagues on your projects simultaneously on the same project at the same time. You can run different scenarios, understand what happens if we get this planning or that planning, or we go with that bank or that bank. What does it do? Literally a few clicks, you can have two scenarios run side by side. And then also the report generation. So we designed it in a way that it creates a report designed for what a lender like you or me in our previous capacities would love to see, because it covers all of those data points really clear and simple. So that's where now that MVP goes beyond just an alternative to a spreadsheet, and it becomes a very powerful SaaS tool.
Yeah, I think that's all of the features that you mentioned there are incredibly useful. And for those who are working with these development appraisals, they can totally resonate with like, I've done it so many times as well, going through multiple different scenarios, and having, it depends on how your model is built. Mine is relatively detailed, so I almost need to save a new Excel sheet every single time. I can't just open up a new tab because of the complexity of some of the formulas. It just it's easier to save it on a new sheet. Whereas I think, by the sound of it, Aprao has thought about these things and already solved them. I mean, in terms of your the positives and negatives about bringing technology in to solve a problem, there is always a case, not always, but there is always a concern that sometimes you over engineer a problem, and using technologies for technology's sake, or something like that. Do you think, are you ever worried about that? Are you ever conscious? Because again, some of these developers are sending you really complex, or sending both of us really complex models. How do you find that fine line between something that's too vague or too complex? Are you continuously iterating the software?
So the whole point is we're not, some people like to work on a high level. Let's say you've got a developer who uses a third-party contractor rather than managing construction themselves. They may have a construction figure, which is a lump sum principal contract. It could be in £1 per square foot or per meter, or it might be as a lump sum. But equally, you might get a company who do all of the construction in-house themselves, and they itemize everything down to each individual material on the site. So we had to accommodate both extremes there, from a single line item all the way through to hundreds or thousands worth of line items on just within the construction cost element of Aprao. So what we did is we created a framework. So rather than creating a very complex network of different things, all we did is we created a framework. So as a user, you can label things as you wish. If you call it construction cost, it's construction cost. If you call it build cost, it's build cost, etc. You can label it, and it's bespoke to, or it feels bespoke to the user in that sense. And then within there, it's up to the user to go into the level of detail that they want to. So if you want to do the back of an envelope type appraisal feasibility, you can do it literally 1 minute. I could run a very quick appraisal. If you offered me a site from a template that I've got in Aprao, I could tell you the residual value in under 1 minute. If you wanted to do a full detailed breakdown and a cash flow forecast, you can do that. It might take you 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on the amount of detail and time you're going into. But either way, it's a lot quicker than I was spending when I was running cash flow forecasts in Excel.
I mean, this is what technology should be doing, really, isn't it? Creating speed, creating efficiencies, basically making processes streamlined. In terms of adoption, the difficulty sometimes with technology is adoption, and it can take time. I was watching I was listening to a podcast about the founder of Deliveroo, and he was talking about the timing of when this product had to come out. The technology wasn't quite where it needed to be when he thought up the idea, so it was, he knew that there would be no adoption. It would be impossible because it just wasn't the right time. So in terms of, and there's a whole variety of different things that affect adoption. I truly believe that Aprao could be something of very much of it is already to a certain extent, but I think it could be even more so a widely perceived industry standard, whereby developers are encouraged to use that software because they know that the lenders are going to be able to communicate with it much better and receive it in a better way. So what's your process? What's your thoughts behind that? What sort of horizons are you looking at? What sort of hopes do you have?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You said it quite rightly. It's no longer just a vision. It is actually partially a reality now. So we've got several thousand projects being appraised in Aprao every single month, which is amazing when you step back and think about that each one of those is a physical development site sat somewhere in the world, and those numbers are being run through our software. Literally, hundreds of projects every single day, which is really great. As somebody who created the business from scratch, to see that, it's really rewarding to see. But then the lenders that we are working with it comes back to the point that you said there, Sam. Ultimately, it makes their life easier to receive this consistent flow of information. So we work quite a lot with all of the different lenders because they're now recommending Aprao to their customers because it makes their life easier. And if it makes the lender's life easier and the lender's recommending something to a developer, then the developer's most likely going to take it seriously because ultimately they want to borrow the money. So and that's how things are growing very fast for us at the moment. And I think every developer wants to work smarter, not just harder. And they also want to look professional when approaching banks and lenders. So ultimately, Aprao is allowing them to do that. And so what we find is generally a customer will sign up to Aprao. They will share that with their lender and share it with their network. And then we'll see a few other sign-ups as a result where people have that network effect starts to take place where they're sharing Aprao with their stakeholders, and the people on the receiving end see, okay, well, this is a lot better than the Excel spreadsheet attachments we were sending around by email. So let's come on board. And that's where the adoption's really moving fast.
Yeah, I remember seeing Aprao from developers and from valuers. They would use it as part of their valuation report to show that the residual land value and the calculation, because it summarizes everything in a aesthetically pleasing format, and creates a report which that was when I first switched on to Aprao and these sorts of softwares being readily available for SMEs, etc. So with the product itself now and the team that you have, do you have a CTO that's really helping with the tech and continuously thinking of pushing it forward and how it could be better and how could it be improved? Or do you think you've reached a point where you're happy with everything and it is what it is?
That's not how venture-backed companies work, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, but essentially, no, this is just the beginning. So we are, we're pushing the product, we're growing the team, we've expanded internationally. But coming back to your point about CTO, so my co-founder in the business is Jonathan Rail. He's the CTO of the business as well as the co-founder. And he's got near on 20 years experience of building cloud-based B2B SaaS web apps. I met Jonathan in the very early stages of the business in 2017, and we started to work together to build that MVP. And we then officially were both full-time on it from the beginning of 2018 as co-founders. So he is from a technical perspective, everything that you see and all of the great comments we have from our customers around the ease of use and how stable the software is and how enjoyable it is to use, that all comes thanks to Jonathan. So that's a continued and ongoing approach in the software. If you think, okay, we're done now, we've built it, then the moment that you say that, it's already outdated. You need to keep on moving constantly. I had no idea how much of a living and breathing beast a piece of software is. It's literally something that you need to keep on maintaining, keep on building on top of, keep on working on making sure it complies with the latest standards of the internet, and also obviously you want to continue growing the product with new features and new elements to it as well.
And this international growth that you had, it was something that crossed my mind, that it's quite scalable due to the fact that you've got development everywhere. It's pretty much the same, right? You've got the price that you're buying something at, how much you need to spend on it, and what's going to be worth at the end, and you can work backwards to get your residual land value calculation. You've got cash flow forecast, etc. So that's pretty similar everywhere you go. And what countries have you found adoption for Aprao thus far?
So our primary market's obviously the UK. Second largest market for us has been Australia so far, and then we also have customers throughout Europe as well, in a variety of different countries. So we have a Euro version of Aprao, which is available obviously for anybody in Europe, along with the most square meters, not just square feet. So as a user, you can customize those settings. But it's actually worth noting as well that we introduce multi-currency, not just for those developers in those regions, but what we've also found is you get international developers. So you might have a property developer based in London who's developing something in the south of France, for example, or you might have somebody who's based in Europe developing something in London. So we've got all of that functionality built in to take care of customers in any major market. So we've got US and Canadian dollars, Australian dollars, euros, pounds, all built into the platform, and so it is scalable. And the fundamentals of development do remain the same pretty much anywhere in the world. The only difference is currency and taxation.
That's great. I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things about any tech business, is that it should have scalable characteristics, and the fact that you guys are already going into markets outside of the UK is a really, really positive sign. One of the features that I noticed, or one of the way that the product is offered recently, was, I thought, a very good move. Which was the 7 days free trial, just to be able to get people to get comfortable with it and give it a go. What brought you to that realization that you wanted to do that, and how has it been received since you've made that move?
Well, we first introduced a free trial actually 2 years ago. It was at the beginning of COVID. So that was when we made the shift. So originally, it was very early on in the product, and we were doing pretty much one-on-one demos with every potentially interested customer. Because the product was younger at the point, or less mature, we wanted to show people how to use it. But then as the product developed, it's obviously become very, very usable, and we've got self-service onboarding as well to help that journey. So we introduced a free trial. Originally, it was as a month's free trial during COVID. We thought, look, it was right at the beginning in the first lockdown in the UK, and we thought, well, at the moment, we're probably not going to be doing one-on-one demos with people. They've probably got other stuff on their plate. So let's just do this. We'll trial it for a month. And as a result, we were inundated with people signing up for the free trial, which was incredible. And then from that list of people on trial, we realized that a lot of them were then becoming paying customers after that. So we continued with that. We also realized that a month wasn't actually needed. People were able to discover the true value in the software in a shorter time frame, so we reduced the trial length, and then we've ended up at 7 days, because ultimately if you're a developer looking at a project or a potential user looking at a project, within 7 days, you're going to know whether or not Aprao works for you. And the truth is it does work for anybody if they're willing to take a look at it. So we're obviously confident in the product.
I mean, yeah, I remember when Nick mentioned to me that was going to be happening. I thought it was a really, really good idea. And I'm not surprised that you've had a positive uptake from there as well. I mean, with prop tech businesses, or technology business in general, but property technology specifically, there are a bunch of different technologies out there that are coming up through the ranks. I mean, from a entrepreneurial point of view, and just for the people out there that are interested in doing similar, well, not, yeah, similar property technology type companies, whatever field that might be specifically. Are you aware of like the multiples of these businesses that they can sell for, that they can get valued for? I understand Land Insight recently had a really strong valuation, an investment. Is that I'm and with this kind of global reach, I'm and scalability of this kind of product, I'm guessing it should have a really, really healthy, future. Is that something at this stage you ever think about? Do you have a focus on? Do you have a number in your mind that you want to get to? Is that how you kind of, is that part of your vision, or is that something that's kind of like, I'm just enjoying the journey and the mission right in front of me?
But fundamentally, we're just focused on building the best possible product. So from our perspective, we obviously talk about valuations when it comes to fundraising, and where we've raised investment from investors. You look at the value of the company, because that sets the price of the investment. But from this perspective, from the perspective of where we are now, we're still so early in terms of what the potential that we've got and what we can achieve, that's not even a topic of conversation or consideration at the moment, because we're just continually trying to grow and build Aprao as a business and as a product. And also as we grow, as I mentioned previously, internationally, we're literally just beginning. On a global scale, the UK market's strong, but it's not one of the biggest markets in the world either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've got Australia and the US, just, and just general. I mean, the whole world, they're developing everywhere, right? Whether you go to Dubai or India, it's like everybody needs, and the numbers, and numbers are numbers at the end of the day. They translate well wherever you go. So the idea that Aprao for development finance appraisal model is great. Do you see that there's going to be potential for, and I mean, do you have it in your mind that there might be any other products that you want to bring out? Where would Aprao try and kind of move into any other spaces? Is that something that's on your radar at all at the moment?
Well, we're sticking around the financials for now. So essentially, if you think about it, the financial model is at the core of every development project. As you know, developers got their own model, the banks got their own model. But once a project's live as well, it's got a financial model which is sitting at the core of the project. And so our vision for the company is to become essentially the new industry standard for financial modeling in real estate development. So every project going on, we want to have an Aprao financial model sitting at the core.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think if you start to dilute and start to think about too many other different things that maybe are not important right now, you end up losing focus of what you're really trying to do and what you're really trying to build. The name Aprao, what actually, where does it originate from? I always think it sounds like Portuguese.
Well, we used to be called Appraised. The company was called Appraised, and we had a not so catchy domain name. It was appraised.tech, and we just had a really nice branding job done. So the logo that you can see, that was already set up, but with the word appraised, and a lot of the brand stamp had the letter A as kind of like brand. And so we were like, okay, it'd be nice if we had a .com domain name, and it'd be nice if it wasn't too long. So we started searching. We're like, what 5-letter domain names are available which start with at least the first letter. And so so what we ended up with, you know, we came up with a whole short list of different options, but Aprao stuck around because it had the beginning of appraised with AP, yeah, that was the beginning of the going from appraised to Aprao was actually quite a easy transition. When you've been working on a business for at that point a couple of years and you'd had one word you kept on saying over and over again, it did feel weird at first, but it was actually surprisingly easy once we had the new branding, the new website, everything set up with a prayer. I now forget that the company was called something else to begin with.
Yeah, no, prayer, and it's great that you've got the background there as well. It's you know, it really helps. It's a really well put together logo. It does feel very much like a brand, and yeah, like you said, the more you say it, the more it becomes a household name. And I think that's the intention. So you've got a team right now. How big is the team, and kind of are you all working remotely since the COVID thing? Because a lot of tech startups, a lot of tech companies, they used to be in kind of incubators. Now, is that something that you guys are at all worried about in terms of everybody working remotely, or do you encourage it?
Yeah, well, we definitely don't worry about it. We're a fully remote company, so fully distributed. So our team's spread out across 4 continents, I think, right now. So maybe 3 continents, but yeah, pretty spread out. And we work in an asynchronous way. So the whole team communicates through a tool we use called Basecamp, and we work in obviously different time zones as well. So don't want to go too deep on asynchronous communication, but it's designed to work in a way where basically you can work as a team without having to all jump on meetings, because jumping on meetings means that everybody needs to be in the same time zone at the same time, and it's hugely inefficient on everyone's time. So we focus on written communication, and people are able to share ideas, and then anyone in the company can comment on those ideas when they're online at that moment. It doesn't need to be at that moment when they're online, and it creates this really nice asynchronous communication way of working. So we've now got, as you know, we've got colleagues in different countries. So we've got somebody from a support perspective who's online pretty much 24 hours as well now. So if we've got customers in different parts of the world, they're being supported. And most importantly, having an asynchronous and having a fully remote, fully distributed company means that people can live where they want to live. So we've got members of our team who have moved from central London out to Wales, one of my colleagues who now lives in the countryside. And then we've got another colleague in Surrey. We've got myself. I've spent a lot of time overseas in the UAE and also in Portugal. And then we've got colleagues who live in different countries. So it's a really great way to build a company, because ultimately when we hire, we have an endless talent pool, because we're not limited geography to commutable distance to a certain office location. And also it means that people can live where they want to live. And if you can live where you want to live, it means you're happier. If you love surfing, you can live down in Cornwall, wake up in the morning, go for a surf, and then come back and start your day. So when people are turning up to work, they are happy. And so I'm really proud of the culture and the company that we built with that fully remote way of working.
Now that does sound really great, and I think that especially since COVID, where everybody was locked up, and really appreciating the outdoors and some of the flexible working that came from it. Some people are worried about productivity levels, but I think that if you can provide a happy, motivated, an inspirational workplace, it can be done remotely. And especially, I think that the tech company culture just seems to it's such a new way of working in general anyway, in front of a laptop, etc., that I think that you can embrace it and really make the most of it, and still maintain those productivity levels. I think another concern sometimes with regards to property technology, or technology of any type, specifically social media, if you like, is things like privacy. So, what if a developer was thinking, oh my God, I've got the deal of the century. If I put it into this system, Daniel used to want to be a developer. He's going to see the details and he's going to go and steal my development. Do you ever have any of those sorts of concerns? Is that something that, I'm not you specifically that you might steal? It might go into the right hand, I hope you get what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah. The truth is sending an Excel spreadsheet by email is far, far, far riskier than using a cloud-based piece of software with the correct security protocols in place. So actually, I think a lot of the time people choose to move on to a cloud-based tool because it is more secure. And we don't have access to our customers' feasibilities or appraisals, and no one else on the platform can see theirs. The user is in control of their own data. If they do share a project with someone, there's a link-based sharing which they can toggle on and off on a project, so they're in control. Send it on to a bank. When the project's dead or not happening, they just turn that off. So we're just going through our ISO certification for the ISO 27001, which is basically it covers a lot of different things, but a big part of that is data security, to basically put people's minds at ease that we are following the right procedures and have the right policies in place. And so, that's a really important part of what we do, because quite frankly, we wouldn't be in business if there was any kind of issue with regarding people's data.
No, I think that's fair enough. I think the privacy thing is a talking point for a lot of technology companies, but it's certainly something that I think a lot of focus and attention has been brought to it. So it's not something that I personally get too paranoid or worried about, but I can imagine that there's probably one or two people out there that do think of these sorts of things. In terms of the biggest problem that you foresee in Aprao growing to where you want it to be, what's your biggest challenge that you foresee that you've got to overcome?
I think it's an educational part. I think a lot of people in property have done things a certain way for a long period of time. They don't realize that there is an ability to work smarter rather than just harder. So an example of this was somebody I was talking to the other day who was looking at, being offered 10 sites a day from different land agents selling sites, but he was only able to run a handful of them through his Excel model because it was so time consuming. But his starting point was, I don't need a prayer, I've got Excel. And then the conversation developed into, well, okay, if you created a template with all of your standard assumptions, and then when that deal came into you, you could simply plug in a few headline numbers and understand the residual value literally in under a few minutes. Would that mean that you would assess more of those sites? And very quickly it was yes. And then it was, well, and also what if you could do that from a tablet or a mobile device essentially, without needing to sit down at your computer and open your Excel spreadsheet? Would it mean that you would look at more of them? Yes, absolutely. And then making sure as well, taking it that next level further, that if you have a site that's moving forward, would you like to be able to present a pack to a bank which is available in literally a click of a button, rather than having to format a Word document with screen grabs of Excel spreadsheets, etc.? Again, yes, absolutely. And so through that conversation, it's an education piece, and people see very quickly that, yes, they may have had an Excel spreadsheet, but there is a much smarter way of doing things, which can allow them to make faster data-driven decisions. And actually in property, a lot of the time it's saying no. You don't have the capacity to develop every site that comes your way. So a lot of developers, they want to be able to run numbers and say no quickly so that they're not wasting their time on something that doesn't go anywhere. And so ultimately going through that educational phase with a lot of people, they see very quickly the value of having a tool to help them in this process. And so we spend a lot of our time from a marketing perspective actually communicating that to people, so people are aware, because unless people feel that they have a pain or there is a pain, then there's no reason to change anything.
Totally makes sense. From the idea that you've got these conversations with developers who are saying that I've got my own Excel spreadsheet. These people typically are kind of stuck in their way or don't necessarily know how to program their own spreadsheet. And therefore, if you can provide them something, as you said, it's now a mobile app. Do you have it mobile ready?
It's a web app, but it's fully responsive. So it's not designed for, it's not a mobile app, but I would recommend sort of anything down to like a tablet, like an iPad mini, that kind of size. It works brilliantly. So we test everything on tablet side of things, because we've got customers who are out doing valuations and development appraisals, the first back of an envelope type approach, out on site using an iPad, and making sure, going from site visit to site visit and seeing and kicking off their appraisals, also showing them back, because it's cloud-based, showing that back with members of the team who may be in the office or working from another location. So it's basically a fully responsive web app, so you can access it on any device with an internet connection.
And my final query or question that I'm wondering is, you've got, as you're putting in build costs, for example, or you're putting in GDVs, it calculates the GDV per square foot or the build cost per square foot. There's applications out there that will be able to give you a GDV per square foot for a certain postcode, or a build cost like BCIS, for example. Is that something that you are able to, or have ever thought about hooking in together to be able to get analysis very quickly of whether the GDV's in the right place, or the build costs are in the right ballpark for that region?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that's really important to us. So we're in the process of speaking with a few different companies on the potential partnership and integration to bring that data in line directly into Aprao.
I think that would be very, very, very cool, and speed up a lot of, I think, on lenders' side as well. And I just across the board, basically, I think that would be a massive game changer. Daniel, it's been a real pleasure. I think I've grilled you question after question, and you've battered them all away. So I really appreciate you spending the time with us. I'm hoping that we can do this again sometime as Aprao takes on the next wave of adoption, and we see you as a widely consumed property technology tool across the industry.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you very much for having me.
All the best. Catch up soon. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got lots more super active property people coming up, so keep up to date. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, leave us a comment, share us and find us across social media, and we'll see you next time.